guys, and welcome to a video that's a little bit different to the videos that I usually make. Now, I apologise for the infrequent uploads, simply just that I've been so busy doing casting events I haven't had the time to sit down at my computer and make a video, but this video is inspired by a post that I read through Reddit, and it's on the Vainglory forums, which I'll post a link to in a minute, including the work of the user that inspired this video, and it's about the language of the Churn. Now, if you've been following the Churnwalker teaser videos and all the lore that has come out, there has been lots of interesting language that Sugar Venom has created for Vainglory as a whole new language. And it's really interesting, and it's got a lot of people talking, and specifically got a user called Irate Pirate talking. And he made a really interesting post about each individual phrases and his sort of take on those phrases and what he might think those translations are. So I was really interested in what he'd done, and I wanted to make a video on it, including having a look at some of the phrases myself and seeing what I could come up with. So this is a video where we are going to try and decode the language of the Churn. Now, Vainglory is not the first sort of game or world to make up their own language. You've got Klingon, which was made up for Star Trek. You've got the Game of Thrones language used by the Khaleesi's tribes. And so obviously lots of languages have been created for various different universes over the course of the last, however many years, and language was created probably in a similar fashion in the first place. So let's have a look at the phrases that are included in both the video and the text, and we'll just say them out loud first. So this is kind of not been practiced, by the way, guys, so this might be a little bit odd sounding. I suppose the language is odd sounding, so I could technically say it however I wanted. Edu drovi sikri skiv kegragas. Ebet ikro ido. Ikro vli vi shavod. Oeda vli stishad. And then there was a part where he said, the whisper is my only companion, or perhaps Ikri ust bu idam. Ikri idat I voda vlebut. And there was one in the text which read, Astek givav ikri edu buvad bebu. Now, as you can see, it's a very consonant-heavy language, and it's quite harsh and sounding, but it's a really interesting language nonetheless. So let's go through it and sort of I'll bring in points that Irate Pirate has brought through, and I'll try and add in some of my own analysis as well, because I'll have you know here, guys, I am not a language analysis guy. I'm a maths guy, but I'll give it my best shot. So we're going to start with the easiest one, which is Ebet Ikro Ido. Now, Ebet Ikro Ido is in the first video, and it very clearly says that the protagonist responded with his own name, which means we are going to assume that this is a variant of what is your name. Now, we don't know if the words are directly in left to right order like you would see in Western English language, so we're going to assume that this is going to be a variant of sort of a Yoda-like speak almost, or name yours is, who you are. And remember, it's demanded. The voice demanded, Ebet Ikro Ido. And it wasn't a request. It wasn't like a politely asking what is your name. It demanded to know. So it could very well be who are you, who you are, or name you have, or name yours is. Because as you'll see later on, Pirate and a lot of other people have come to a conclusion that Ikro is a form of you, I, sort of a way to refer to someone. So Ikro, we are pretty sure, means you. That would mean that the phrase would either be you have you name, or name you have. So Ido and Ebet could either be named or have or are or name. So it could be who you are. So who could be Ebet or are. It's obviously, as you know, there's lots of variants here, but the first phrase we are pretty sure is a variant of what is your name. We are almost certain that Ikro is you. It's just what Ebet and Ido mean. Now, Ebet could be a conjoined what is, so it could be like what's your name. So Ebet could be that. There's lots of different ways to put this together, but just looking at this first sentence, the major thing that is gleaned based on the next thing that we're going to move on to is that Ikro probably stands for you. So we're going to note that one down. Ikro, we are going to assume is a form of you. So we're going to move on to the next two phrases, which is ikro vli vi shavod and weda vli stishad. Now, these are two phrases that actually we've had a bit of help on. The Sugar Venom herself actually confirmed that weda vli stishad means I shall return, or I will return. Vli could mean either or. Now, as Martin was leaving the Churn insisted that ikro vli vi shavod. And I'm going to guess that that is along the lines of you will not leave. So it's insisting that you will not leave. And then Martin responded, I will return. Now we're going to assume that ikro is you. So we're going to bring that across from our previous translation, and ikro is you. The common theme between two of these sentences is vli. So there's going to be a word that is common to both of these sentences that makes sense. And vli being that, I'm going to assume it means will or shall. So that's my theory behind that particular set of sentences. And then I'm going to assume that vi is a negative, so not, and then shavod is leave, and stishad is return. I'm not so sold on weda being I, but I guess that could very well be the case. I will return. And it's an exclamation mark as well, so he's exclaiming that he will return. So that sentence is one that's been confirmed. So shavod and stishad do sound very opposite. You know when you just get the feeling that they sound opposite? Well, I got the feeling that they sound opposite, so I'm going to assume that leave and return are those two particular words, and that vli across both sentences, because it is common, is the will part, and vi is the not. So we can only assume that weda is going to be I, vli stishad, I will return. And the interesting thing about this is it reads like regular sentences. A lot of the other sentences, you aren't sure whether it reads left to right, and this gives a little bit of evidence to the first phrase that we looked at, that it might actually be something along the lines of literally what is your name, or what you name, or who or something that would read normally, because it feels like these sentences read normally in terms of left to right. But these are that's the assertions that we can make from this. So vli is will, shall, ikro still we're going to say is you, weda could be I, shavod is leave, stishad is return, and vi is not. Another theory that I was looking at was that weda might be he, so he will return, because it is the Churn part of Martin talking when he responds. When he responds in his own voice, he responds with Martin, but when he responds in his Churn state, it's almost as if it's not actually the original Martin. So it feels like when he is saying something, he might say he will return. So he says, you will not leave, and Martin then responded with he will return, as almost like he's a different part of him, because I feel like I might be another word, and I'm going to come on to that in just a second. The next one's a little bit harder to decipher. It's the last video, and it's the whisper is my only companion, or perhaps ikli ust bu idam. So it's a sentence that he says, and is part English and part Churn language. And it seems like it's a direct opposite of the whisper is my only companion, or it is some sort of contradictory statement to the whisper is my only companion. Now, the reason I say that is because, following that, he says, in either situation or in either instance. So it's two distinct states of being, or two distinct related sort of instances. So it's very difficult to translate. This is why I think ikri might be I or we, because the way that I view this is, he's talking about feeling more and more disconnected from the regular world, and now the Churn is becoming his world. He no longer has any friends, and now the whisper, which has been the Churn in his brain, is his only companion. And it seems that he's slowly, even over the course of this video, realizing that he is now the Churn. He is part of the Churn. So I almost feel like this sentence is, or perhaps we are the same, or I am the whisper. So ikli is like I or we, and I'm pretty sure bu is the. So it feels like this is we are the same, or I am the whisper, and he is realizing that actually the Whisper isn't his companion. He might actually just be the Whisper. So then, or in either instance, the only world for him is now inside the Churn volcano. So that's what I gleaned from that particular sentence. The next one's a little bit more difficult, even more so as we go through some of the letters and the words. We're getting a feel for what they could potentially be. Obviously, this is all going to change if more and more comes out, because it's very hard to translate something without a reference points, and this is all kind of based on guesswork for the most part. The next part is the one that's in the text only, so it was never spoken in a video, and it was said that it was Astek Givav Ikri Edu Buvad Bebu, and it was after Martin had pulled a flower off, and the flower had spun its roots back into the ground immediately after it joined back with the churn. And it's very difficult to say what this actually means, because the only word that we have any kind of recognition of is Ikri, which is where we get a we or an I from. Now, I feel the churn is never going to refer to themselves as an I, because the churn, by its very definition, is assimilating. It assimilates you. It swallows you, as Adagio said. So you become part of its entity. So I feel like it's a we. So it always ever refer to itself as a we. So I feel like the churn would specifically never refer to itself or a sentence involving itself as I. It would always be we. And after he'd just snapped a flower, which is another living being, which you can only assume is part of this living network of beings that the churn encompasses, it would be a we. So I feel like this phrase is either saying something along the lines of within here we can live forever, or in this domain we cannot be hurt, because it technically, for all intents and purposes, killed the plant by snapping it, and then it just plunged its roots immediately back into the floor to continue living. Or, as I feel like the churn is an enticing being, it says something along the lines of "Come further, we have much to show you." So, as if Martin was astonished how this plant reacted, the churn says, "That's not the only thing we can do. Come further, and we have much to show you." So that is the two potential thought processes going on here. Because if you read back into the law, Adagio talks about two sisters, and these two sisters are serpents, and in Idris's law he fights them for this book of mechanical sort of inventions that can help hold back the churn. And the two sisters, they refer to, communities and everything that is not the churn as the problem. And so it just feels like it's a very assimilating, it tries to win you over. So that could be some potential translations for this sentence. But it's very difficult to get a read on what those other words actually are. Because again, the sentence structure is still up in the air and we don't know exactly what each individual word can mean. But Ikri is along the lines of I or we, or so we believe from what we've seen so far. So this is one of the harder ones to try and translate, but it's just based on what we can glean from that small passage of text. Now, there are two more sentences left that we haven't yet touched. One is Idu drovi sekre ski kegranis, which was in the initial teaser for Churnwalker. Unfortunately, there isn't a direct written down transcription of that, so I'm not going to touch it just yet, and I'm going to focus on Ikri idat evoda vlebut, which is the final sentence in the third video. At the very end, after Martin has succumbed to the churn has, as we can anticipate, overtaken him, and he has become the Churnwalker. So this is going to be a statement that has some impact, a final statement, a statement that after the churn has taken over Martin, it's almost like he will now be referring to people reading his notes or people viewing the video, being you guys, and it's almost his statement before he takes his place in that halcyon fold. So it will be, we know that Ikri is we. Idat is very similar to Idam, and I said Idam is maybe the same. So let's think of join and the same as synonyms of each other. So we join, Ivoda vlebut. Well, vl is initial part of vli, and we sort of anticipated that vli is going to mean will. And we want to feel like the churn does two things, right? According to Adagio, in the law, the churn does two things. The churn swallows and the churn kills. So either you are swallowed and consumed by the churn or you are killed by the churn. So I anticipate the last bit of this sentence is likely going to be, and death will come. So it's a very final statement. We join. It wraps up the Martin. You saw You saw the transition in the final sentence where he was talking about his work will never end, turning into this demonic Churnic voice, and then he has joined. He's fully overtaken by the Churn. The Churn has become him. They are one. So we join, and death will come. Not going to touch the last one, like I said. Really interesting doing this and trying to figure out this language. I'm sure I've probably missed the mark on huge amounts, but I think it was really fun to try and delve into it. As soon as more comes out about it, I'm 100% going to publish a video because I have loved following this. Thank you to Irate Pirate and everybody in the thread and also on Reddit for all of their contributions, because this has been really fantastic to follow, and I hope you guys have been as excited as I have been about this particular addition to the Halcyon Fold. I will be back with a new video after the weekend, I'm afraid. I'm going away for the weekend. Maybe I'll get one out tomorrow morning before I go. That's more than likely. And then I'll be back next week. So I'll see you guys soon.